In the words of Dr. Stacy Sims, women are not small men. And I will add to that men are not just large women. So in today's video, we are going to get deep into the anatomy, physiology, the science behind the difference between men and women when it comes to workouts, nutrition, and supplementation for really optimizing body composition, strength and performance, overall health, but also optimal hormonal health. And I did a talk on this a while back, a year or two ago, and got really great feedback. And since then, I've learned so much more about the key differences in nutrition and training and supplementation for men versus women that I thought I would do an updated video to let you guys know the new research that I've kind of come across. So this whole video is going to shed light on macros, on high carb versus low carb, on fasting. We're also going to talk about hypertrophy training versus power and just pure strength training, HIIT, CrossFit style training. And then towards the end, we're going to get into some details around supplementation for athletes and sports nutrition, just giving you the different perspective, the different needs of men versus women. If you're new to this, welcome. I am Ashley Drummons. I have been in the health and fitness industry for over 15 years, everything from being a NASM personal trainer, a certified nutritionist, starting my own nutrition food product line, being a strength and conditioning coach, integrative women's health coach. And now I am super passionate about helping active athletes, fitness enthusiasts, fitness professionals really get better educated on the deep science behind their bodies so they can optimize their training, nutrition, and supplementation. So let's dive in and let's get into this. So let's first talk about the differences in hormones of men versus women. So there's a lot of things that we are very similar in regards to basic human anatomy and physiology, our heart, our lungs, our digestive systems, our brain, all of these things. But there's some key differences when it comes to our hormones that make a huge impact, especially for women in macronutrients, in training and supplementation. First off, the key hormones, I just want to demystify this. The key reproductive hormones of testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone are found in both men and women. Yes, both genders have all of these hormones. The difference is the amount and the structure of the hormone makeup. So for men, the dominant hormone is testosterone with smaller amounts of estrogen and progesterone. For women, the dominant hormones are estrogen and progesterone with smaller amounts of testosterone. Now, these hormones are super important because they are basically chemical messengers that are essential for critical body functions, everything from your metabolism, your sex drive, your growth and development, digestion, your mood, everything. So we're going to get into this pretty deeply so you can understand like how it affects your sleep cycle and so much more. We also have hormones like cortisol and insulin that play a huge factor in nutrition, training, stress, adaptation, and things like that we will get into later on in this video. But to start out, we're going to focus on these three main reproductive ones. So one of the biggest differences between men and women when it comes to these hormones is men have pretty consistent hormones every day, day in and day out. There's not a lot of fluctuation going on. Women, on the other hand, experience major hormone fluctuations every single month. And it impacts the energy levels, it impacts the appetite, it impacts our ability to train and hit those like peak performances. And it also impacts things like fat metabolism versus carbohydrate metabolism. So to kind of deep dive into this without getting too off topic, we do have to talk about the menstruation, the menstrual cycle, how women's hormones are impacted in this. And the interesting thing about this in all the studies they've done is men and women are most physiologically similar during the first 7 days of a woman's menstruation, her period, basically, because that's when our female hormones are at the lowest levels. So even though most women during these days feel far less than fantastic and ready to go, this is actually the best time in our cycle for us to focus on strength, focus on power, and really hit those intense sessions. So while we are very similar in these first 7 days, there's also some very big differences that we have outside of just the fluctuations of the monthly cycle that women experience that men don't experience. And one of those key differences is when it comes to body composition and body fat. So body fat in general is always seen as like a negative thing. Like, oh my God, like don't eat fat because it'll make you fat. That's not actually true. But also women trying to just reduce body fat so low because there's such like this stigma around it, where in the world of body functions, your functional nutrition, functional health, optimal health, you have an essential amount of body fat your body needs in order to just maintain proper function. And I'm not talking about like energy to do a workout. I'm talking about to make your brain work, your heart work, your hormones, your digestion, to make everything work properly. The big difference between men and women is the baseline of essential body fat that we need in order to have optimal health, including optimal hormonal health. So for men, essential fat is around 4 to 5%, where for women, essential body fat is around 12%. It's a huge difference. So why is there such a big difference? Well, a few reasons. Women are designed for reproducing. So our breasts naturally are carrying extra essential fat for this process, but we also need extra fat in order for our body to properly produce the sex hormones of estrogen and progesterone in high levels in order to carry a potential pregnancy and reproduce. So we're going to talk about this because this gets really important when it comes to fueling your body through workouts, how to sync it in time with the menstrual cycle. It also gets really important in recovery and optimizing the overall stress response on the body. So another difference we're going to get into is muscle fiber makeup, and then we'll talk about some other things too. So going back to the whole essential body fat for women, when it comes to fueling women's bodies through workouts, towards the first half of the woman's cycle, so we're talking days 1 through 14, this is called the follicular phase. I will dive into this more shortly. Because of the higher levels of estrogen that we have during this time, our bodies actually rely less on carbs and more as fat, as opposed to the man's physiology who relies more on carbs. Women are naturally better at utilizing fats for fuel than men are. However, the interesting thing about this is that actually shifts for us. So first half of the cycle, we can rely on fats to get us through the workouts. When estrogen starts to come up, we need a little more carbohydrates. But then halfway through our cycle, as we get into the second half of the phase and the luteal phase, the hormone levels go way up. We have estrogen and progesterone now. And because of this, our body starts to actually spare our ability to access our glycogen because it needs that extra energy in order to produce higher levels of hormones. So women actually need higher levels of carbohydrate intake in the second half in order to get through our normal workouts, as opposed to what we would need in the first half. So this is a big difference between men and women too when it comes to nutrition and training. In the first half, we can follow a similar eating pattern as a man would. Then in the second half, we have to actually switch our normal nutrition pattern to make up for that higher level of hormone. So if you're a woman and you are working out regularly, you're doing intense workouts 4 or 5 days a week, you have to learn how to track your cycle and keep in sync with it so that you understand in order to hit those numbers and hit your normal performance in the second half of your cycle, you're going to have to provide your body with more carbohydrates. Men do not need to do this. Men can pretty much eat the same year round. Now, when it comes to the muscular makeup of men versus women, men naturally, from just a physiological standpoint, tend to have more fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers for power and strength. So aside from them having higher levels of testosterone, these type 2 muscle fibers, those fast twitch, that makes it a lot easier for them to build muscle, where women tend to have more type 1 muscle fibers, which is why we naturally tend to do better at endurance. And women have always leaned towards cardio and endurance. The beautiful thing, though, is you can make the body adapt. Through men can train more endurance to develop those type 1 muscle fibers. Women can do more weightlifting, resistance training to develop those type 2 fast twitch muscle fibers. That's the great thing. Understanding, though, your body's natural genetic makeup is optimal for how you need to work on your weak spots, because as a woman, it's going to be a lot harder for you to gain muscle, but when you start to train the body in a way that is favorable to the type 2 muscle fibers that are fast twitch, you will not only change the body composition, so you will see your physique transform, but also you start to balance out the body with both type 1, type 2 muscle fibers. And this is a big thing with people who do like Olympic lifting, CrossFit, where there's normally a pretty good balance of power and strength and heavy weightlifting, but then combined with some sort of conditioning to help balance out those type 1, type 2 muscle fibers for both men and women. So the great thing is, even if men, you're starting out type 2 muscle fibers, you struggle with endurance, you can train your body and work on adaptability with more hypertrophy or doing more endurance 20-30 minute type conditioning workouts that help you with the type 1, where women, you can build out those type 2 muscle fibers by doing more heavy weight with less reps, and then doing things like sprint, explosive, power type movements. So the next part I want to talk about is about glycogen and muscle adaptation and the muscle glycogen turnover. And I'm going to take this directly from a book that I love by Dr. Stacy Sims, because she explains it so perfectly and better than I could for you on how we fuel our workouts differently as men versus women. So as a man or a woman, the key difference, according to Dr. Sims, is women's capacity for muscle glycogen turnover, which all that means is it's being able to access stored carbohydrates. So women's ability to be able to access their stored carbohydrate glycogen source is much lower during times when our estrogen levels are high. So what this means is, for women, right before ovulation and in the later second half of our cycle, right before your period, when estrogen is naturally higher as progesterone starts to drop off, this is why you tend to crave more carbohydrates right before your period, because your body has a harder time accessing that stored glycogen as a source of fuel. But here's another thing that's different that she states too. Women tend to use more carbohydrates during our recovery time than men. So while I mentioned earlier that women, when we exercise, our body tends to utilize fat for fuel, but when it comes to recovery, our bodies tend to utilize carbohydrates. Post-workout carbs, post-workout protein is super important for women. I mean, it's important for both men and women, but for women specifically, we need that post-workout protein and carbohydrate because that's what our body utilizes for recovery. During recovery, women tend to burn through carbs, where men tend to burn more through fat during recovery. It's interesting because it's kind of flip-flop. So men utilize carbohydrates during their workouts as a fuel source, but need more of they're burning through more fat in recovery, where women, we're burning through more fat as a fuel source, but need more carbohydrates in recovery. See, I think that this is super fascinating because it helps you know how to fuel your body through your workouts and your recovery process. So Dr. Sims also shares that when it comes to post-workout and your fat burning metabolism, so say you just did a really intense workout, everybody knows that you have that afterburn, that post-workout burn. The post-workout fat burning for women our metabolism actually comes back down to our normal levels about 3 hours after a workout. Whereas for men, their metabolism will remain elevated from the workout for up to 21 hours later. That is a significant difference in the amount of post-workout fuel, macronutrient intake, recovery process of what men need versus what women need. We're going to get into the nutrition part of this later in this video of whether you're a man or woman, how you need to eat for your workouts for optimal recovery and performance. But learning all this is just so fascinating if you think about the fact that like all the science and research out there is like, oh, post-workout metabolism is boosted for up to 12 hours or 24 hours, when the science and the research shows that for women, it's actually only about 3 hours. Men are the ones that tend to have that longer post-workout metabolism 21 hours later. And who knows why? Maybe it's because higher levels of testosterone. I don't really know. I haven't gotten that far into it, but that part alone, I just thought was very fascinating. More on this. So the other thing that is different for women versus men too, is because we have higher levels of progesterone, almost couldn't say that, progesterone, which is catabolic. So if you don't know what catabolic means, catabolic is where your body starts to break down muscle tissue for nutrients and getting amino acids. So if you are skipping meals, if you don't get enough protein, for what normally happens for women is your body will go to the muscle tissue and break it down, because that muscle tissue is full of amino acids and stored glycogen, that carbohydrate source. That's what happens when your body is catabolic. So going back to that, because women have higher levels of progesterone and progesterone is catabolic, when it comes to nutrition, it is essential for women to get that 20 to 30 grams of post-workout protein within 30 minutes of finishing their workout, because as women, our bodies are more prone to go straight to tearing down all the muscle that we just worked really hard to build as fuel for recovery. So remember what I was saying before, that in recovery, women use more carbohydrates, men use more fat. The muscle tissue is where we store glycogen and carbohydrates in our liver and in our muscles. When you skip the post-workout protein that your body needs because you just worked really hard, so you've depleted the glycogen stores from the food you ate or from your liver, what happens is your body will go to the muscle that you just worked really hard to build to pull amino acids, protein, and carbohydrates in order to recover. So when you don't do a post-workout protein carbohydrate source, you end up basically counteracting all the hard work you just did, because progesterone makes us more catabolic as opposed to men. And what ends up happening on top of this is, while psychologically as women, you might think, oh, I'm going to skip that post-workout meal so that I can save the calories and be in a little bit of a deficit. While you may think that that means that you're going to end up burning more fat, it actually does the opposite. When you skip this post-workout nutrition, it signals to your body to store more fat. The reason being is because you are depleting it of the protein and carbohydrates that it needs. So it signals to your brain, oh no, we're low on food. Make sure to store extra on the body in case we totally run out. So that whole mindset of, oh, I'm just going to skip like some of these meals because it's going to make me lose body fat, it's actually doing the opposite. Whereas if you were to consume that post-workout protein and carbohydrate intake within about 30 minutes, your body would actually signal that it is okay to lose extra body fat because it is being properly fueled. The muscles are being restored and replenished with that protein and carbohydrate source. So don't skip that. Men, you also need post-workout protein too. I'm not dismissing what you guys need. It's a little more scientific and complex on the women's hormone side, which is why I wanted to break that down. All right, so let's get into the specifics around nutrition, how to eat, how to train based on hormone makeup. Guys, I'm sorry, I got to talk to the women first because our hormone makeup is a little more complex. So if you are a man who is listening to this, be patient, stick around with me, or you could get out a pen and paper and share this information with your sister, your mom, your girlfriend, partner, or friend to help them know how to better fuel their body for their goals. Okay, so for the women who are menstruating or should be having a menstrual cycle, if you are not having a menstrual cycle, we will get into that later. But hopefully hearing this will help you better understand everything that's happening with your hormones throughout the month so that you can help support your hormones, hopefully get a regular schedule, and then get everything back on track. One of the key things that causes women, active women, athletic women to stop having a menstrual cycle, it's not just about underfueling where you're under eating and overtraining, or you're in way too low of a calorie deficit to even have normal body functions, but it's also stress. Stress can signal to the body to shut off certain non-essential processes. So like your essential processes are your ability to breathe, keep your heart working, keep your brain working, your eyes working. Reproduction is not essential. So when we're under stress, whether that's physical stress, emotional stress, and extra stress, if we are under eating, it signals to, and I will talk about this more shortly, your HP axis, which is your stress response regulator, to shut down all essential things, because right now we've got something that needs all of our energy and fuel. So I'll talk about that towards the end, but for the woman who is cycling regularly, we have menstrual cycles every 28 to 35 days, give or take. Every woman is different, and your cycle can vary from month to month. Some months it might be a little bit shorter, some months it might be a little bit longer. So breaking down the menstrual cycle, because there are so many women I talk to that don't really even know what's happening in their body every single month. And it's important that you do, because when you have the awareness of what's going on, it gives you a sense of freedom, because when things are happening, you're just like, oh, it's because my estrogen is high and this is what's going on and I just need more carbohydrates. Instead of freaking out and thinking the world's coming to an end, the awareness empowers you. Education is always empowering. So I'm going to break this down in case you don't know what is happening to your body. And I'm going to tell you how to sync all this stuff, these hormonal changes that are going on, with your nutrition, your workouts, and supplementation. So normal menstrual cycle, day 1 is the first day of bleeding. So day 1 till about days 5 or 6, maybe 7, all your hormones are at the lowest level. That's what causes you to shed the uterine lining. That's what happens is your estrogen, progesterone, everything comes down, almost flat lines, and that is what causes you to start your period. At this point, all those hormones are the lowest. You might feel really tired the first couple days for a lot of different reasons, because of the amount of fluids you're losing, but also because of the amount of minerals and electrolytes in those fluids that you are losing. So it's very important during this time, you're getting plenty of hydration with electrolytes to keep everything nice and hydrated, but also making sure you're getting all the minerals you need too. So those minerals are things like magnesium, zinc, a lot of your vitamins. Like, think of this as you are, sorry guys, as you're bleeding, your blood carries a lot of these nutrients, water, and minerals in it. So it's very important during this time you are staying fueled with that. When it comes to training, though, during this time, you are most able to hit your numbers, hit your PRs, push through intense workouts, and really just give everything you've got. Part of this reason, too, is because remember when I was talking about when estrogen is higher, it makes it harder for us to access the stored glycogen. So at the beginning of your cycle, when estrogen is very low for those first 7 days, you're able to easily access all that extra fuel and carbohydrate source in your body and able to push through those extra workouts. So This is days 1 through 7. After this, and all of these are give or take a day or two. After you finish your period from around day 7 to 14, we start to go into what's called the follicular phase. This is when estrogen starts to rise, and you have another hormone called FSH, which is the follicle stimulating hormone. Basically, it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It stimulates follicles in your ovaries to release an egg for pregnancy. Now, estrogen is your muscle building hormone. As I mentioned before, during this time, while you can go harder in the first half of your cycle because estrogen is going to be there to help you build muscle, estrogen also gives you a lot of energy. You are going to have to support yourself if you feel a little bit tired or not quite able to access those big numbers in performance. You are going to need to provide your body with maybe a little more carbohydrates during this time because estrogen is sparing your glycogen stores. So if you notice, you feel great during days 1 through 7, but then days 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you're not feeling as strong. Your energy's kind of low. Maybe your mood is a little bit off. Just increase your carbs just a little bit on those days, especially timed around your workout, and you should be good to go. Most women, like I said, will make their greatest strength gains and have the most PRs during this first half of the cycle, days 1 through 14, because your body's ramping up hormones. It's giving you tons of energy because it's trying to prep you for the potential of a pregnancy. So you'll also notice too, when it comes to recovery during this, you're going to recover a lot better and have less pain overall, which is also why you're able to handle more intense workouts in the first half of your cycle and menstruation. So once we get through ovulation, things change drastically. So you have ovulation, you've got this big mountain. If you saw a chart of this, your estrogen comes way up, then it peaks, FSH is released, you have LH, which is your luteinizing hormone, and then estrogen just drops off, not forever, but it just comes right down. And then you have progesterone that comes in. Progesterone comes in, and then estrogen will start to come up. In a perfect hormone world, these two are in perfect sync, in perfect balance, and you don't even feel the difference. You have no PMS, you have no mood swings, you have no cravings, your sleep is great if you have perfect balanced hormones. Now, if you are athletic, that's probably not the case, and I will explain to you why shortly. But we go through ovulation, estrogen peaks, FSH, LH, all those peak, and then estrogen comes down and progesterone takes over. And this is actually when our bodies kind of go into this thing of rest and recover, rest, digest, and recover, because progesterone is responsible for helping build that uterine lining for a pregnancy. So assuming that estrogen had the follicle stimulating hormone, you released an egg, maybe that egg was fertilized, progesterone comes in to help build a uterine lining to protect that for the sake of a pregnancy. But because of that, progesterone also puts you in a state of rest, relax, digest, recover. Progesterone is the antagonist to estrogen. So when your estrogen is high intensity, high sex hormones, high sex drive, while progesterone acts more as an anti-anxiety, a calming hormone. You might notice you sleep a little bit more in the second half of your cycle because the whole purpose is progesterone is trying to protect a potential pregnancy and is getting you to rest and relax. So this huge internal process is happening in your body safely and securely. So women, I know this has happened to you. You go to the gym one week, you're crushing your workouts, you feel solid, you're dialed in, you're focused, you're hitting PRs, you are just killing it. And then you go in a week later and you're tired. The 100 pounds feels like 300 pounds. You're nowhere near the numbers you were hitting last week. You keep hitting a wall and you start to question if you are losing all of your muscle gains that you've been working so hard for. When this happens, more than likely what happened is you had 1 week during the follicular phase, and then you came back the next week, and now you're in the luteal phase. Very different training, very different access to carbohydrates, very different hormone structure that you have to think about. So we're going to talk about this. Let's talk about the luteal phase. During the luteal phase, this second half of your cycle, so like I said, it starts after ovulation around day 14-ish. Everybody's ovulation is different. But that's the standard. If it's a 28-day cycle, you probably ovulate somewhere around day 13, 14. The longer your cycle, the later your ovulation day is going to be. After ovulation, when we go into the luteal phase, not only does your body need about 150 to 200 extra calories per day because of the extra energy needed to produce those higher levels of hormones and to rebuild the uterine lining, but that is specifically when you're also going to need extra carbohydrate intake. And in one study, they actually found women tend to burn up to 5 to 10% more calories during the luteal phase than in the first half of the phase, which is usually why, if you're somebody who is like hardcore macro counting, calorie counting, and you're thinking, why am I eating the same amount of calories, but I'm starving and I'm craving carbohydrates and I want to eat everything? If you're in the second half of your cycle, it's because your metabolism is actually burning an extra 150 to 200 calories a day, and specifically needs carbohydrates during that time. So if you're not getting through your workouts, you're not recovering well, up your carbohydrate intake and your calorie intake just a little. It's nothing crazy. 150 calories is like a snack, and you should notice that you have a little bit more energy during this time. There's a lot of other things too that happen during the luteal phase. So things like your blood pressure actually changes during the luteal phase because of progesterone and estrogen being higher, which is what makes cardio and high intensity activities much harder, because you have higher levels of these two reproductive hormones that impact fluid retention. It's why you feel bloated. Women, if you get bloated before your period, this is why. These two hormones, and I'm not going to get into that part with the brain and the fluid hormone that's impacted, but these two hormones impact fluid retention, causing you to feel bloated, but it also impacts blood volume, which affects your blood pressure. So cardio might feel really hard. High intensity might feel really hard because your blood is going to feel thicker. It's a lot harder to pump out, but also your blood pressure is different and your water sodium levels are also different too. During this high hormone luteal phase, your sodium and your hydration, your water intake actually needs to go up because of how these two hormones are affecting the levels in your body. The reason sodium is important, and you can just, I mean, there's so many electrolytes out there. Obviously, make sure they're natural, but you can also use sea salt, Himalayan sea salt, sprinkle just a little bit of that in your water, because sodium helps your cells absorb the water better to get that hydration level and the sodium intake back up. When it comes to training during this high hormone phase, your body is going to force you and keep you from not being able to go super hard in the second half. You're not going to be able to max out. You're probably not going to have the same strength, and you're probably not going to be able to push as hard, especially in high intensity, like really just intense conditioning workouts. Instead, the way you want to train during this second half is focusing more on strength, your skill, working on form, low to moderate endurance type stuff. So we're not doing high intensity. Maybe instead, after your strength, you just go do a 30-minute walk, or you're doing 30 minutes on the rower at a really steady pace. We're not maxing out because our bodies will not let us max out. This is not the time to push extra hard. It's actually focused more on strength. And they actually tested this theory out with women, and the women who allowed their bodies to rest a little more in the second half of their luteal phase saw a 32% increase in strength when their cycle finished and they came back around and started training hard again because they listened and synced things with their body and gave it that time to kind of just rest and recover. Now, rest and recover during this phase doesn't mean you can't do anything. It's just instead of trying to hit 1 rep max, 3 rep max, we're focused more on form, movement. We're moving weight, but maybe more at like 65, 70%, not 85, 95%. And we're not doing high intensity stuff. We're working at a very moderate pace to give our body and our hormones the opportunity to just kind of do its own natural process. What happens with a lot of women and a lot of athletes is we feel all of this happening in our body. We feel like, man, I just don't have the energy today. Like I'm tired. I don't know what's going on. I don't feel like I'm recovering. But mentally, we've conditioned ourselves to push past that. And then when we do this and our bodies are already under fueled, now trying to be in a phase of rest and repair, we actually have something happen to our bodies where the lower that extra amount of progesterone that should be produced will actually get lowered. And instead, all the energy that was going to go to producing progesterone, our body will take that and instead pump out more cortisol. So in the beginning of this video, I said we would talk more about cortisol and insulin. So cortisol, it is an energy source. Naturally, cortisol rises in the first half of the day and it starts to taper off as the day goes by. It gives you energy. It's also really important for a lot of different things: blood sugar control, inflammation, allergies, digestion, everything. When we push our bodies past a certain point, especially when it comes to like the time when progesterone is trying to come up and we just need to like take a step back and relax and fuel with more carbohydrates, our body will pump out more cortisol instead of progesterone. And that progesterone starts to come down because it's trying to give us more energy, but it doesn't have the fuel in order to do that. So it's like, oh, well, they want to get through this workout. We'll just pump out more cortisol. And then hopefully like they'll kind of taper off and progesterone can come back up. It's usually not the case. Most athletic women have been pushing and pushing and pushing for very long periods of time. And then you end up with hormonal imbalances where you have estrogen dominance, low progesterone, and very dysregulated cortisol levels for all the reasons that I've been said on top of other things. The other big issue too that a lot of athletic women and active women have is dropping too low in carbohydrates. This is your energy source. Glucose is still the #1 energy source used in the body for ATP, energy production. And if you want a whole talk about this, I did a whole video on explaining how your metabolism works, the Krebs cycle, ATP, and energy production. And I'll put a link to that in the description below. So what happens when a woman's carbohydrate intake drops too low for the energy that and the demand that is placed on her body as an active or an athletic woman? It causes a drop in estradiol and a rise in estrone. So estradiol is it's basically an estrogen, and a rise in cortisol because progesterone has now been converted into cortisol, like I explained, signaling to your body to store more fat because clearly we need to conserve energy because we aren't getting enough food, and your body is smart and will store extra fat to keep you alive and to keep your vital organs functioning. I know so many women athletes who try low carb, their performance goes down. Next thing you know, like their mood is off. Now they're not sleeping well. Now they have hormonal imbalances. And this is why. Your body needs carbohydrates. Women need more carbohydrates than men for all these reasons and fluctuations that I've mentioned about how we need carbs to recover. We also need carbohydrates to produce the right balance and flow of female hormones. And when you start to cut into that, that doesn't mean your body is just going to go to body fat because it wants carbohydrates. Instead, it's going to store fat in case you starve it too much. It'll still have enough fat to take care of your proper functions, that you have to make sure you're fueling for your daily energy demands. So here's the thing. This isn't just about intense training and under eating. It's also about if women are under stress and in a calorie deficit, the body will respond the same. So if you're going through a stressful period and your carbs are too low or your nutrition is off and you're not fueling enough to get through that stress, because you got to think about it, stress in general. If it's emotional stress, it still takes up energy in the body to get through that more than when you're relaxed. If it's physical stress, it's still energy. So if you are under eating, even during times of stress, your cortisol still goes up, progesterone and estrogen hormones go down, and the body stores more fat for survival. If you are an athletic or active woman who doesn't have a regular period and you feel like you're eating enough carbohydrates for your training, you may not be eating enough though for going through long periods of stress. So this is what we're going to talk about now that I mentioned before, the HP axis. Good or bad, exercise is a stress on the body. So then if you add on top of that life stress or emotional stress or mental stress, your body will shut down reproduction systems out of survival because of the HP axis. It's called HP axis dysfunction. What the heck is the HP axis? The HP axis is our stress response system. The stress response is connected between the neuroendocrine and autonomic nervous system with the purpose of providing energy that is needed to respond to a threat, but then to return to homeostasis once the threat has passed. Things that can disrupt this healthy stress response where the HP axis returns to homeostasis or isn't returning to homeostasis are things like birth control. Birth control actually disrupts this process. Most women don't know that. And high levels of stress, which produce elevated levels of cortisol over long periods of time. And like I said, this can be from overtraining, under eating. It can be just life stress. It can be from not resting and recovering properly. It can be from restricting carbohydrate intake. It can be physical and mental stress. And what happens is your HP axis shuts off the reproduction of your female hormones because the cortisol stress response is signaling to your brain that there is a threat. And when the signal has been going on too long, so if this is long stress or a long period of overtraining or a long period of restricting carbohydrate intake, that HP axis never goes back to homeostasis and you end up with HP axis dysfunction, which ends up with either not having a menstrual cycle or a dysregulated menstrual cycle. So what does all of this mean coming full circle? I know this is a lot and your brain is probably like, what? But once you start to understand your hormone makeup and you get, your body is in a rhythm, man, woman, doesn't matter. Your body has its own rhythm. It's got its own sleep-wake rhythm. Women, you have your own monthly rhythm and each woman is unique. Once you start to pay attention and get to know your own body and your own rhythm, the thing that's important is you have to fuel your body with adequate carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Not fasting, not keto, not low carb, not the latest Ozempic weight loss drug, none of that. Your body needs protein, carbs, and fat. You also have to rest and recover. You have to take time off in life and training. You have to have a healthy amount of body fat. Fat is not bad. Your body needs it, your brain needs it, and your hormone needs it. Like I said, essential fat for men is around 4 or 5%. Essential fat for women is around 12%. These are all things your body needs. If you don't know what your carbohydrate or macronutrient needs are, I did do a whole video where I break down like, take this number, multiply it by this, and this is your caloric range. Here's your carb intake. And all of it is done based on your goals of losing weight, maintaining weight, or gaining weight. And then also your activity level. So if you're sedentary, active, or very active, and then also based on your body makeup. So if you're an endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph, I did a whole video on that. So if you have no idea what your range should be, go to the description. There's a link to that video. I will walk you through exactly how to find that. But you need to know that stuff to know even like, what is your baseline? What is the minimum amount that I should be eating in order to sustain bodily functions, optimal health, but also hit my strength and performance and workout goals? So now, men, thank you for being patient. Now we can talk a little bit about you. Men, you are built more for strength, power, explosive sports because you are made up more of those fast twitch muscle fibers. However, if you start to incorporate more HIIT training and endurance training, you're going to balance out your body composition. You're also going to balance out your muscle fibers and just be a more well-rounded athlete. When it comes to nutrition for men, while men do tend to thrive more on trying low carb and intermittent fasting diets because you guys don't have fluctuating hormone levels, I am still a firm believer that balanced nutrition for both men and women is the best approach. So while men can do keto and fasting type diets, you guys also risk the chance of having endocrine hormone disruption, dysregulated stress responses, as well, even if you are low carb. So that's the thing. There's actually a lot of studies being done right now that men consuming high protein, low carb diets are showing a decrease in total testosterone levels for a lot of reasons. It's the same thing with women that go too low carb in their diet, is it creates a stress response in the body. Cortisol goes up. In order to produce those greater levels of cortisone, some hormone level has to come down to compensate for that. So even though you can support a low carb diet or intermittent fasting or keto diets, the studies are showing that it actually ends up decreasing overall testosterone levels and creating hormone imbalances in men as well. Your body needs a balanced nutrition of protein, fats, and complex carbohydrates from whole food sources. Like I mentioned earlier, glucose is still the most widely used energy source in your body. Your muscles and your liver need this. So getting adequate amounts of carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and macronutrients are essential, not just for your hormone production, but for your body, just to be its best self. Again, if you need help figuring this out, go watch the other video where I will walk you through exactly how to do this. So let's talk about supplementation. I will start with the men first because that's where we're at right now. Did you know that most men who have lower than optimal levels of testosterone all tend to be deficient in very key vitamins and nutrients, and that is zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D. Now, there's other nutrients, minerals, vitamins, and things that are very important, especially if you're athletic, because you get more easily depleted in them. But when they have done studies on men who tend to have lower levels of testosterone, they also have nutrient deficiencies in zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D. For women, most women tend to be low in magnesium, but also low in iron, zinc, vitamin D, and B vitamins. In fact, a lot of women that have issues with PMS, heavy periods, hormone issues, they have experienced significant relief by supplementing with the right amount of B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D on top of a couple other things. For both athletic men and women, personally, there are key vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that I do believe every active person needs in order to consistently feel well mentally, feel well physically, while also just giving your body extra support, because as an active person, you are under higher amounts of stress. Like I said, physical exercise is still a stress on the body. So you're under higher levels of stress physically, on top of whatever you're dealing with in your everyday life as well. The other thing too, though, is the more you sweat, you have water-soluble vitamins and minerals. So things like your B vitamins, vitamin C, electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, zinc, all these things get sweated out of your body. You pee it out, you sweat it out. So as an athlete or somebody who's very active, it is so much easier to get depleted in this. And then you have all your systems that start to get shut off and malfunctioning. I was explaining to somebody, or no, in one of the videos, I was talking about how you have the Krebs cycle, which is it's your body's, it's basically the production of energy. But if you look at a detailed micronutrient image of the Krebs cycle and all the vitamins and nutrients and minerals that are needed for each part of the cycles in your body, you'll see how one depletion, B12, B1, B6, which by the way, a lot of athletes are low in B12, B6, and B1. B12 is used for carbohydrate metabolism, for red blood cell production, for oxygen. It's one of your stress vitamins. So it gets depleted easily under times of stress. B1, a lot of active people are low in B1. B1 is a very hard one to test for, but B1 is essential to the mitochondrial function. So the mitochondrial function is that outer part of the cell. It's the powerhouse of the cell. But B1 is used to digest and metabolize carbohydrates. Athletes tend to be low in it because not only are we sweating out these B vitamins, but we also have higher carb intakes than usual. And B1 is literally like one of the most important vitamins in all of our metabolic processes. Then you've got B6, also water soluble. B6 is super important for neurotransmitter production. Your neurotransmitters being serotonin, dopamine, GABA, things like that. And I'm not going to go into every single B vitamin and what it does, but as somebody who's active or athletic, in my opinion, what I'm about to list off, I think would be so huge and beneficial. And this isn't just based off of like a theory. I have spent years researching this stuff, courses, certifications, books, knowledge, testing things out on my own, that I do believe that when I've worked with clients and helping them with optimizing their physical, mental health, but also strength and performance, these are the key things that make the biggest difference. So for both men and women, electrolytes. When you choose electrolytes though, number one, you want to make sure any electrolyte that you use does not have colors, dyes, silicone dioxide, magnesium stearate, or sucralose. There's no reason for your electrolytes to have color. If it's got color or anything artificial flavor, you might as well throw it out because all those chemicals were made in a lab and are going to do more harm than good. You need some sort of electrolyte to replenish and hydrate your body. Methylated bioavailable B complex, high potency. So everything that I was talking about with B vitamins, standard B complex is not going to cut it. Standard B complex is made for your average person who probably is inactive, doesn't really have a lot of stress. It's also probably got cheaper forms. So like thiamine hydrochloride, that's B1. It's a very cheap form of B1. If your B12 is cyanocobalamin, very cheap form of B12. It's like literally the like least expensive form of B12 and also the one that's like harder for your body to absorb. You've got B6. If it just says B6, I think it's pyridoxine. Gosh, my brain right now. I think it's pyridoxine. You don't want that form. You want B6 phosphate. It's more expensive. It's a better form, but you want high dosage too. So when you're looking for B12, 500 micrograms. B1, you want at least 20. B6, you want at least 20. Most of the ones that are out there are going to be very cheap and very low dose, but your B vitamins are so important from everything from stress and nerve support, but also to carbohydrate, energy, metabolism support as well. Magnesium, I've already mentioned several times in this. When you get magnesium though, so first off, as an athlete, you need higher than what the average person needs. And that can range anywhere from 400 milligrams to 600 milligrams. Most magnesium supplements that are out there are going to be in the cheap, terrible form of magnesium oxide, which has a very strong laxative effect. The best forms of magnesium are magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate. Glycinate you want to take at night because it does kind of make you a little sleepy and relaxed, but you want to make sure you're getting the right dose too. Like I said, most magnesium supplements, even multivitamins, whatever, have like 20, 60 milligrams maybe of magnesium, and it's probably made from magnesium oxide or some other cheap form of magnesium, but you do need this as an athlete. Magnesium is responsible for over 300 essential functions in the body. And like I mentioned before, a lot of men who tend to be low in testosterone also are low in magnesium. We then get into zinc. Same thing. You don't want zinc oxide. I personally like zinc. I think it's picolinate. That's one of the better quality, better absorbable forms. Anywhere from 15 to 20 milligrams. You want it to keep it super high quality. Zinc's important for inflammation. It's important for your immune system function. It's important for hormone production. Zinc is super important. Vitamin C. Now, some people disagree with this. For me, I believe vitamin C is super important. You want to make sure it's super high quality though. Again, most supplements out there are vitamin C from ascorbic acid. Most ascorbic acid is made from GMO corn. And it's really cheap. That's why most people use it, is because these companies are making super cheap supplements that don't actually do anything and are made from garbage. So when you're looking for vitamin C, my favorite is liposomal. Liposomal tends to get absorbed by your cells much faster instead of having to go through the gut and getting broken down by all the stomach acid. And we're going to get into stomach acid in a minute. But liposomal, I mean, it helps with recovery. It helps with oxidative stress, helps with your immune system. It helps with serotonin production. Liposomal vitamin C. Omegas. Omega-3s, you want a higher level of EPA to DHA. EPA is super important, and typically athletes need much higher levels. Those fatty acids help us so much with recovery, with muscle synthesis, with triglycerides, with everything. You just want to make sure it's a super high quality omega-3, because a lot of times the omegas that are out there are coming from just like a mosh podge of whatever fish that's out there, and then it's got all kinds of like plastics and fillers. Again, stay away from artificial flavors, stay away from silicone dioxide, titanium dioxide, magnesium stearate. But I usually like to get about 2 grams of omega-3s split up into twice a day. So 1,000 in the morning, 1,000 at night. Next thing, probiotics. Probiotics are, everything starts in your gut. If you've got bad gut health, you are not going to absorb any of the nutrients. You're going to have issues with inflammation. You're going to have hormone imbalances. You're probably going to struggle with allergies, with food sensitivities, with stress, anxiety, because everything starts in the gut. Your stomach sends signals to your brain. Did you know that 90% of serotonin, so serotonin is your happy hormone, is made in your gut through the right bacteria, the microbiome balance? Yeah, it's crazy. With probiotics though, more is not necessarily better. So when you look at a probiotic and you see 30 different strains, that's not necessarily a good thing. Right now, the ones for athletic people that work best and have been proven to survive the stomach through the gut, the journey through the gut longer, are spore-based probiotics. Any functional doctor, naturopathic doctor will tell you spore-based probiotics, because they last longer and have the ability to actually get absorbed into the intestines. Athletes, active people, tend to have higher acidity levels. They have very different stomach environments. Even from my own experience, I have tried all kinds of probiotics out there. I've tried ones for women. I've tried ones that are supposed to be for active. I've tried ones that have high amounts of strains. I've tried others. Spore-based probiotics has worked the best for me. So I always recommend that to other people, because it does tend to last longer in the gut, so you get better absorption. It also helps with the absorption of nutrients and any vitamins or minerals that you're taking. Last one that I think is, obviously it's optional, but I highly recommend it, is adaptogens. So I think I'm going to do a whole video on explaining adaptogens, because a lot of people ask, like herbs, mushrooms, things like that. Adaptogens are pretty much what it sounds like. They help your body adapt to stress better. So it helps with regulating your cortisol levels. It helps support your adrenal function. So your adrenals sit on top of your kidneys and are basically the precursor for DHEA, which is for your hormone production. When you've been under high levels of stress, your adrenals pump out more and more cortisol. They eventually start to burn out. Hormone production goes down. It just can't keep up with the levels of stress. Adaptogens help your body in supporting your adrenals to regulate the stress response. There's also specific ones that help with strength and performance, things like rhodiola, cordyceps with functional mushrooms. Then you have other ones that help with cognitive focus, helping you think better, like lion's mane. You have others that are for immune support, but adaptogens are great because they're natural. You want to make sure you get one that's organic, and you want to make sure you're getting one that actually has really quality ingredients and potency, so that you're not just taking something that's like part adaptogen and part plastics and fillers. Again, nothing artificial, no synthetics, no dyes, no any of the bad stuff. You don't want any of that in there. So highly recommend adaptogens too. Supplements and quality of supplements is important. Just as like a really quick rule of thumb, you want to make sure anytime you buy supplements that it's third-party tested. Third-party tested means that the person or the company that made that product has been sent out to a third-party outside lab, not related to the company, and has tested that product for the ingredients, the quality, and the potency that it says on the label. Why is this important? Most supplements you buy, believe it or not, I know this is going to come as a shock to you, people lie. It'll say you have 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C. You send that off to a third-party lab and you find out it's only 200 milligrams. And the other part that makes up the 1,000 was really plastics and fillers. Happens all the time, unfortunately. Lower quality supplements, you're basically throwing away money because it's not in a form that is high quality with bioavailability, but also they're using things other than the actual nutrient to fill and make that weight in order to put that claim on the label. So you want to make sure something is third-party tested, because it confirms that the amount, the dosage, and the quality is actually what it says it is. Also, if you can find a supplement, this is kind of, I'm not hardcore on this for a few reasons, but if you can find something that's NSF certified, that's great. Because if you are an athlete who has to test for a sport, NSF makes sure that there's nothing in there that's illegal or banned in the ingredients that would help with your performance. However, NSF, I've got a bone to pick with you, because while NSF does certify to make sure there's no illegal substances in a supplement, they will still certify something that is full of sucralose, artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, toxic chemicals, dyes, and cheap ingredients. So NSF is more so if you're just concerned if it's anything illegal, but do not take the NSF cert as a stamp of quality, because it absolutely is not. There are a lot of supplements out there that say NSF certified, and then you look at the ingredients and it's like, oh, yellow number 52, blue number 6, sucralose, silicone dioxide, titanium dioxide. There's only like 3 micrograms of B12 in here, and those supplements are garbage. But like I said, if you are an athlete and you need that, it's worth looking at. All right. To wrap all this up, because I know this has been a lot of information, the best place to start with your training and nutrition is to get to know what your body needs. Watch the video that I said about how to figure out your exact macros and use it as a starting point. That's your baseline. Then start to pay attention to your body. Are you recovering well? Are you able to perform? Do you have plenty of energy in your workouts? Women, are you ovulating every cycle? Ovulation is super important and signs of healthy endocrine function. Are you having normal, consistent menstrual cycles? Men, how are your testosterone levels? How is your overall mood? How are you feeling? Are you recovering? Are you hitting your numbers? And then adjust it. If you're not feeling great, maybe your body needs a little more carbohydrates. Maybe it's more than you thought. Believe it or not, your brain uses up a huge chunk of the glucose and carbohydrates that you have. So maybe based on like the macro calculator, you need 200 grams of carbs, but you're somebody who has to use so much of your brain every single day. You might find that you have to up your carbs in order to keep your cognition and to be able to focus on your work. So number one is get to know what your body needs and listen to that and adjust accordingly. Number two, incorporate both physical and mental rest days. I had a naturopath on not that long ago, a couple weeks ago, and I was asking her about rest and recovery for athletes or highly active people. And and this is not the first time, I've had multiple functional doctors and like athletic type sports nutrition doctors who say the biggest problem with highly active people and athletes with health and inflammation and recovery is you need to allow about 72 hours in between your HIIT and intense sessions to keep inflammation low and allow your body to recover. And even Dr. Stacy Sims, who I mentioned previously, same thing. She believes no more than like 3 super hard, intense workouts a week to allow your body to rest and recover. And really, rest and recovery is when your muscles grow. So, number 2, take physical and mental rest days. Your body repairs and grows stronger in rest, not by overtraining. Then the last thing is just women, start tracking your cycle and getting to know your body's own rhythm. The more you learn how your own body works and fluctuates, the more you'll know how to pair your training, your nutrition, and supplementation for performance, strength, recovery, and optimal hormonal health. Now that I've shared all that with you, I would love if you let me know what you thought. What was your favorite part about all of this? And is there anything specific you want me to touch more on? If so, just leave me a comment and let me know. But after you do that, make sure you check out in the description where I put the links to the other conversations if you want to learn more about how your metabolism works and the micronutrients, but then also figuring out your daily caloric intake and macronutrient needs based on your activity level, your body type, and your goals. So be sure to do that. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so I can continue educating you on how to provide your body with the most optimal nutrition, functional fitness, and mindset so that you can feel your best inside and outside of the gym. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the other videos.